Welcome everyone to another episode of the Ol'Timers Comic Book Show, the show where the hosts aren't old, well at least one of us isn't allegedly, but the comics most certainly are. Joining me as always, it's the Professor.
Hey, Johnny.
Hey, how's it going, man?
It's going.
Recovered from no prize decent Marvel books.
I have recovered from talking about books I don't like.
There you go. And join us again is the competent Crusader, the 13th Crusader. There he is.
Gentlemen.
13. How's it going?
It's going great. At least half of me says it is.
Yeah. Well,
you look a little green with envy today, 13.
Oh,
I am green with envy.
Green with envy.
You're just going to have to deal with it.
Is that because you're envious of all the teams that have won a game and stuff?
That may be part of the reason, yes.
Yeah. Cool. I'm not saying anything because I don't want to jinx tonight at all. But Josh, we're coming for you, Josh. Josh, random dude, Josh, we're coming for you. Just saying. Frey won't care anyway. Either way. So the theme of today's show is what? Bad mirrors, isn't it? Bad images. It's good guys gone bad.
Yeah.
Like a kind of mix of how different characters can be used different ways. We all have our heroes. I think Tom Brady went to Tampa.
He did. Yeah. Won a Super Bowl.
Jerry Rice went to the Raiders.
Yeah, who remembers that?
Joe Montana went to the Chiefs.
Yep.
Yeah. Marcus Allen went to the Chiefs. That's probably the bigger deal because he hates the Raiders, doesn't he? Can we think of anybody else in a sporting sort of franchise way? Is there anyone else that kind of lives up? I mean, over here in the UK, there's a whole host of players who've left. I don't know.
Brett Favre went to the Vikings.
Yes, that's a good one. Favre to the Vikings. I find it odd that Favre went from the Vikings via the Jets, and then Rodgers has gone to the Jets. Does that mean Rodgers will be playing for Vikings next year?
Would it matter?
Well, I don't know. I heard talk about. We'll get to comics in a minute. I promise. I heard talk that the Jets were looking because Kirk Cousins is in the last year of his contract, isn't he, at Minnesota? Minnesota could be looking to backdoor him, especially if the Vikes don't pick up some wins.
Well, I don't think when you're not winning, I don't think anybody's safe.
Yeah, that's a fair shout. Right.
Bud, what would you do if Tom Brady came out of retirement and is the New York Jets quarterback tomorrow morning?
It's not going to happen.
Okay.
No, with their offensive line.
But what if it did? Just what if it did?
I can't even wrap my brain around it. What might happen? But
what if he went to Miami? Because I mean, all the old guys go to Miami.
That was the more realistic rumor that he might go to Miami because they were talking to ownership piece, right? Yeah. So but if he came out of retirement to go to the Jets around here, I mean, I don't technically think I would have a problem with it because business is business, but there are a lot of people around here that he would be persona non grata.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's an odd one, isn't it? What if where could Barkley go? Giants could go to the Commanders, he could go to the Cowboys. Could you hack it 13th if Barkley went to the Cowboys?
The way things are going.
I was going to say David Jones, but you'd be like, yeah, let's lose him. I know.
Well, it'll suck because the Giants really entrusted Saquon to carry the franchise, even though they're paying and kind of going with Daniel Jones, do or die. It's one of those things, man, that you kind of need both of them if you want to have a shot.
Yeah, that's a shot. I think Jones gets a bad rep. I think there are a lot worse quarterbacks in the league than Jones.
I agree. He still has a lot of work to do, though.
Yeah, well, so. I mean, look at Garoppolo's made a career out of not being just quite good enough.
Yeah,
quite
good enough that you might want to give him a contract, but just can't.
Yeah. I was reading a Miami Dolphins book about Dan Marino why he didn't win the Super Bowl, and they talked about the year when Steve DeBerg came in, And the knock on Steve DeBerger's quarterback was he's just good enough to help you lose. He's always good for an interception or something down the line. But hey. Anyway, enough sport. We're talking about heroes and their evil mirrors.
Sure.
Or heroes gone bad, depending on how you want to
Heroic
look at it.
villains.
Yeah. Villainous heroes.
Yeah.
Can I say that I'm surprised no one picked one of the ones that I think maybe should have been picked?
Go on then. So who's
Jean Grey, Phoenix, Dark Phoenix.
Yeah, we've talked about Jean
I
Grey
know,
a lot.
but I mean it's the obvious. It's not the obvious Marvel.
No worries, Professor. She'll always come back.
Very true.
Do you think then, because you've raised the question, here's a thought for you. Do you think the Phoenix is the evil mirror of Jean Grey, or do you think that Madeline Pryor, Goblin Queen, is?
I think it's two sides of the same coin. I think they're both dark sides.
How many sides has this coin got?
I look at the Phoenix Force as an entity that had no idea what humanity was about, and just fed into impulses that humans can't understand, and allowed the human emotions that she was trying to learn to dictate what she did. Madeline Pryor is a different ballgame. You know what I mean? So I look at Madeline Pryor as more of a evil mirror, if you will, than the Phoenix.
I think there could be an argument that if we get all psychobabble about this, you could make the argument that it was the human element of Jean Grey that created the Dark Phoenix, not the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
So because but again, that at the time it was always power corrupts absolutely, and absolute power and all that, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely is the phrase. Who else have we got? Bizarro and Superman? No?
I think Bizarro counts. In fact, I thought Bizarro too before I came to my decision. But great, Hal Jordan.
Parallax, yeah. That's a good one.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like, I suppose you could say Sinestro to Hal as well, to be honest. I don't know, it's just when we think about the Owlman 13, Owlman for Batman.
Crime Syndicate.
Yeah. Do you want to take it as far as say something like Rorschach versus The Question?
Well, what's the answer?
I don't know.
I don't know if I would say Rorschach is evil either. He's just
I suppose he's the kind of like he's taken to the extreme, isn't he? I suppose. Whereas the Question,
he's not driven by evil tendencies.
That's a fair shout. Well, he is kind of. It's funny because in the trailer for the Blue Beetle, it says that Batman's a fascist, but I mean, the Rorschach, he lives by some really harsh rules, doesn't he? Yeah, so
he does.
I do like that whole bit in the film where he turns around and says, "I'm not locked in here with you. You're locked on here with me."
Mm-hmm.
And prepares to kick her ass all over the place.
Well, that line was delivered with a bit of gusto too. So
yeah, better than I just did it. Jason Todd versus Robin.
Good one. That's a good one.
Yeah, there's all these types of like, what is it? What is it we like about heroes gone bad or the evil versions of the hero? What is it that we like about them, Professor?
I think a lot of it is because you brought up, and I'm going to bring up the DC side, right? With the DC on the heroes, where they're flawless, right? They're never wrong. They never make mistakes. And then of course now you're able to kind of play in that sandbox a little bit, but you can't really. Like with Hal, they had to create a whole different personality, right? Yeah. With Jason Todd, they had to kill him and bring him back, as someone that was morally questionable. But again, Jason Todd was always kind of a bit of a douche anyway. But with Marvel, I think the line is a lot grayer, right? Especially in the the 90s or the 80s and 90s that we're talking about with like anti-heroes and stuff. You could never tell is the Punisher a good guy or a bad guy. There's arguments on both sides.
Yeah, agreed, absolutely. How about you brought Marvel USA Agent, the John Walker USA Agent, versus Cap.
I was gonna go older and bring up Professor X. Because there were a couple of times that he went off the deep end and no one was sure what his intentions were.
That's true.
Magneto's another one.
I think he's dodgy as Charles. Like I think he's even reading some of the more recent stuff and his power trip is going on in Krakoa. I definitely think he's a little bit.
I wanted to throw one character in here, although he doesn't qualify for our show, but my heart right away went to Superman Red Sun. Just this vision of what Bud said is 1,000% correct, that we always view these classic heroes as flawless. They were put on a pedestal. But what happens with one small twist in a story like that, where he lands in Russia rather than in the US, it changes everything.
Yep.
And now you get to see a Superman where you have no idea with the turn of the next page what he's going to do. And I think that's what people get enamored with as readers looking into these kind of stories.
The kind of the unknown, because everyone we know. Yeah, we know. I think Marvel at the minute are having fun with it with Peter Parker, aren't they? The driving Peter Parker practically do lally tap. But
well, if I could bring it on, I know we're totally getting away from the time frame of the show, but the MCU has been doing things with their villains that make them really identifiable, right? They're not pure villainy. They're villainy with a purpose, where perhaps you might actually even agree with what they're doing. and
this is spot on, Professor. You're absolutely right. The thing about a good villain is that they're doing the bad things for a good reason. We talk about how Lex just wants to protect the planet from aliens. It just so happens he's going up against Superman, who's an alien. Yeah. If Lex lived in Gotham, he wouldn't have a problem.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And same with Doom for all these evil shenanigans going on. When you break it down, he is the ruler of Latveria. And I was thinking about how to pronounce it there. So his heart, he cares about his people. He goes about it in a bonkers way, but he cares about his people.
Yeah, so. And they will care about him.
Or else.
Exactly. Hey, cool. No problem with that.
Yeah. Right. So our 3 books that made the grade. First one, we're going with 13th pick. And this was a question on one of the original Jeopardies from way back when.
Very good. You remembered.
Of course I remembered. This is World's Finest Comics, or World's Finest number 142, featuring Batman. So this book is pretty much a team of book. Batman, Robin, and Superman. Came out in June 1964. On eBay, you can get this for as a low grade. And on eBay, by the way, every version of this is low grade. I did not find a decent grade anywhere. There was even one for £5 with a page missing. So why you might comic with a page missing?
Someone used it to wipe their ass with. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
Fighting talk. Just wait till we get to the X book. All right. On Go Collect, there's quite a difference on this. A 9.6 sold for $1,440, but a 9.2 sold for $288. So it seems to me that some of there are plenty of lower grades of this book kicking around. There you go. The main story that we're going to talk about is written by Edward Hamilton, art by Mr. Superman Kurt Swan, inks by George Klein, and colors as letters. Sheldon Moldoff is our letterer of choice.
It's a murderer's row of creators for
Silver
Age. Who wrote it?
Edward Hamilton. And you can tell. Hamilton's the end, certainly. All right, okay, 13th, this was your pick. I'm going to say right now, I absolutely thoroughly thought this was a charming little book from the get-go, but take it away.
I agree. Well, the first thing is obviously with our topic, but the other part is the reason why I'm interested in this book. So as a kid, the first time I ever saw the composite Superman was in a DC Who's Who book. And for the audience, that's an encyclopedic version of a book of DC heroes explained and villains and things like that. So it's an encyclopedia of information. So I looked at this villain or hero. I was confused as hell. And I was very intrigued. I'm like, yeah, it's a cheap way to make a villain, but I was curious. It did pique my curiosity. So fast forward to years later, I did find get my hands on this book. I do own it. If I were to give it a grade, I'd probably say it's like a 4. It's not slabbed or anything like that. And I read the book for the very first time. I had no knowledge walking into reading this book when I had purchased it. And in fact, in getting ready for today's show, this is the second time I ever read the book. So, I had that feeling when I first read it that, how the memes go. I was today years old when I found out.
Yay.
So I was today years old when I found out how he got his powers.
Yeah.
And
cool.
the usual DC plots back in the day with people getting powers, radiation, or some sort of natural mishap. Back then, people didn't know the effects of radiation. So this is in comic books. They used it to their advantage to create something fantastical that could never happen. So you have a poor guy named Joe Meach here who was hard on his luck, I guess.
Yeah.
And Superman offered him a job in a museum, Superman Museum. And in that museum, there were statuettes of each of the member of this Legion of Superheroes. And lightning happens to strike at the precise right moment. And Joe Meach is endowed with all of the powers of the Legion of Superheroes. I used to think like this guy was just a knock of Superman and Batman with no powers. When I read this for the first time, I was like, no way. I am confused. Like, how how many people there are in the Legion of Superheroes, and why is he dressing up as Batman and Superman? But as you read the story, it started to kind of make sense. And I'm like, okay, it's classic Superman, it's classics Batman and Robin. This is what World's Finest was about. This was your team up book to go to with the two biggest stars in this universe. And you have a being now or a person in a composite Superman with displaying these kind of powers. You wonder how they're ever going to beat somebody like this. So I start thinking of the potential, right, for back then to come up with something like this. The Legion of Superhero powers was just out of left field, but they make a story out of it. And basically Joe Meach, or the composite Superman, tells the heroes, like, basically, I'm going to be your partner, and whether you like it or not, and if you don't like it, I'll reveal your identities to everyone in the world. So now it becomes a case, and it becomes a mission to try to thwart him from doing so. And eventually, one of the things that happens to the composite Superman is that the powers waned, because otherwise these guys had no idea how to beat him.
Yeah.
Years down the road, for this character, for those that are curious, the composite Superman did make an appearance in World's Finest once again. And in World's Finest 168, that's what it is. So he made an appearance again, and at the end of the issue we're reviewing today, he kind of forgot how he became composite Superman. But in issue 168, an alien who had bad intentions with Superman and Batman kind of restored Joe Meach's memory, and onward came to composite Superman again. And
holy Norman Osborn, everyone.
Yeah, he totally got Norman Osborn, and he was well on his way to beating everybody, but
again,
his powers waned, and he became Joe Meach again, and he kind of felt bad. And as the aliens shooting them, the heroes, he jumped in the middle of it, and thus he died. So all this happened in pre-Crisis. I thought the composite Superman was interesting enough to kind of follow up on, more as a childhood curiosity as to why the design. The design always bothered me, but in reading the story now as an adult, I kind of get it. I can see how people back then would have been interested in this. This was a big deal back then. Someone who kind of cornered the heroes, and it was a conundrum. And I think that's the point of this book.
It's interesting because he's a composite Superman, but he's not a composite Batman. I don't know if because he's a composite Superman as a man who is super, as opposed to made up of Superman, which is kind of like a bit of a confusing element when you're a kid in 1960s to work out.
I think the part that made me laugh the most, I laughed out loud reading, was when Superman's like, I'm going to use my X-ray vision to find out who he is. Dude, you're already seeing half of his face.
Three quarters of his face.
Yeah,
three quarters of his face, and he's like, His mask must be lead lined. I'm like, dude, it's there 3/4. What's he going wearing glasses? What's going on?
He's also disguised with a shapeshifter, so
Oh
yeah, it was pretty
my
silly.
god.
Yeah,
that
I
was
did laugh with that. That was hilarious.
Oh man, you're killing me. Took one of my jokes, man. All right, Professor.
Yes.
What did
Well,
you think of? Oh,
no,
I know where this is going to go.
it was well. See, this is the great. I love this page that you're bringing up because the first appearance of composite Superman to Batman, and Superman immediately knows he also has the powers of Invisible Kid, Lightning Lad, and Chameleon Boy, and it's like, okay, because I'm firing my lightning bolts and I'm keeping the other part of my arm invisible. So
Crazy.
I'm like, wow, this is really this is the Silver Age that we're talking about, the DC Silver Age. And then of course Superman tries to look and say his mask is lead lined, and I'm like, well, if he's got all the powers of the Legion of Superheroes, doesn't he have all the weaknesses? And I'm like, Mon-El's weakness is lead, isn't it? So
that's a shout. Didn't even think of that.
So I was like, oh, okay, well, it is just serving the story purposes, but yeah, this is the kind of silliness that I expect from 60s DC. And it was like you said, it was like a cute little read, and you do realize that back in this part, these were not written for teenage kids. These were written for 7 and 8-year-olds that are not going to think too much about this. They're just going to think it's cool that they have Superman and Batman. He's got together with a costume, and he's green, and he's a bad guy, and he's got all the powers of the Legion of Superheroes. Maybe I want to go pick up the Legion of Superheroes book because that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
Right.
And to me, it is silliness at its peak. And I thought it was cute, but you really, you can't just read this and not pause and say, well, that's silly. On to the next panel.
I think what's silly too is the extent that they went to try to keep their secret identities on the wrap. To say, oh, we have to do this, otherwise everyone will know who we are. Whereas today, everybody already knows who you are. You just don't know it.
I have to laugh. Functional maths in full effect here. Your two favorite heroes, Superman and Batman and Robin. That's 3. just want to point that out. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Couple other things. You're absolutely right, Professor. You're not supposed to think about this book because when he gets his powers in the hall, the museum, where's he at? There he is. You can clearly see that Supergirl is there. So therefore, he must have obtained some krypton powers as well. So therefore, he should be affected by the green kryptonite that he uses to weaken Superman. At that point, I will say I love this panel at this top one. I think that is so well detailed. It looks, it kind of looks like it's too good for the book. Don't get me wrong. I love Kurt Swan. Kurt Swan's Superman is the classic Superman look, but that looks way too detailed for this book. Because everyone else looks quite stodgy at the time. What else did I think? Right, the whole big twist at the end of this big crime, how he wants to take hold of the world. He's like, I know, I will go mining. I will use magnet powers to draw the metal from the earth. You've got Element Lad's powers. You can just turn something into what you need.
Well, he did on the next page. He turned it. It was thrown into diamond, right?
Yeah, I was like, well, you can do that all the time. I don't know what you're doing.
Guys, look at his costume. That is symbolic of a split personality.
Yeah, it's just I swear. And then I got quite caught up in this. I was kind of like, oh, well, how are they going to do this then? Because like he's thought of everything. And then it's, oh no, his powers have waned. I was like, you're kidding. You've set me up for 21 pages of this really good villain that's pretty much kicking the asses off of Batman, Superman, and Robin. And it's like, his powers waned. I'm like, oh my God.
I think there's a couple funny things in here too, where Superman and Batman are like, oh, woe is me. What are we going to do? And it took Dick Grayson to say, wake up, guys.
Yeah.
Like, seriously. Like, you're not going to get anywhere by doing that. And then The other funny part too is at the very end when Joe Meach is like, "Hey, my powers are fading and my memory of how things happen is going away. I got to do something. Let me make a note." The guy writes the note and only has pretty much one word left, and you read that and you're like, dude, just
He can't
try to
figure it out.
replicate what happened and find out for yourself.
Yeah.
But oh well.
It looks like my writing. Oh, did I type it? What?
I found this book to be fun though.
Yeah, you know what? I found it absolutely charming. It's not a book that it's not a word I'd normally use for a comic book, but I thought it was charming. I thought it was of its time, to use our phrase. I thought it was an absolutely, it was a fun read, and I was absolutely quite chuffed that you picked it. To be honest, it's the first time I'd read it.
I thought your pick was the same way, so we'll get there.
All right, okay. What? Just charming and fun.
Yeah. I mean, it was charming and fun and of its time. That's
yeah. I had to. Mine comes with a story. I bought the following issue because it has a Black Canary cover on it, and I was like, "What the hell's going on?" So I had to go back and find the issue. Right, time for a break before we get into the Professor's Choice. Professor and I, we also check out the current crop of books from Marvel, and of course, Ahsoka and everything that's affiliated with Disney. So here's your advert. Check out the No Prize Podcast. There you have it, the No Prize Podcast, where the Professor runs the show. Marvel, Disney Plus, MCU, and of course the longest 2 minutes in the 2 minute warning in comic book history. But hey, we wouldn't be without him. Would not be without the 2 minute warning. Some of those books are fantastic.
That's my favorite part of the show, being able to look forward and see what's coming up.
Yeah, I thought you were saying it because it was near the end. That's fine. Harsh. All right, here we go. It's book number 2, and it's the Professor's Choice. It's an interesting choice. I didn't realize this character's evilness went so far back. This is X-Men Alpha #1 from February 1995. Over here, you can get this book at pretty much bargain prices. It's £5. You can spend £5 and get this book. And grade 9 on Go Collect has $36 as a sale price. I'm not sure if it's worth 36. I don't know. And the interesting thing is, this is the period of comics where I spaced out for a while. I wasn't in. I dropped them and I'd moved to Manchester. And I was kind of out of the running, I suppose. One of the reasons was 13th. He's finally made an appearance. 13th. Can't believe I have to say his name on this show. Written by Scott Lobdell.
That's the first thing I thought of. I'm like, how's Johnny going to handle this one?
I hate Scott Lobdell. I hate his writing. I absolutely hate his writing.
Well done.
Might be a good guy. He might save kittens. I don't know. But man, you're right. His writing just does not do it for me. Dialogue is by Mark Waid. Art is by it's a team up book, so it's Roger Cruz with Steve Epting. Inks are Tim Townsend with Dan Penozan. Colors are by Steve. I've got Buccellato with electric crayons helping out as well. Whew. Oh my God.
It's a lot. It's a group effort.
I wish some of them had stayed at home. All right. Professor, this is your book. Well, where is the duplicitous hero in this book, please?
There's a few. There's a few that have gone from one side to the other, right? I mean, You're looking at the good guys on one side now include Sabretooth. What? Yeah. Include Wild Child? What the heck is that? Yeah, right. And then of course
Teenage Mutant Ninja Colossus at the back.
Exactly. So he doesn't appear in this book, actually, by the way, but he's on the cover. So the villain that I actually was thinking about was Dark Beast, who is he's the one that actually has a future after this event book, where everybody else is pretty much gone, with a couple of notable exceptions. But Dark Beast sticks around for a little bit longer. He ends up coming over to the MCU proper, and the 616 proper, not the MCU, and ends up causing some trouble, to the point that outside of our timeline here, the 616 Beast is kind of taking a bit of a turn in the Krakoa X-Men. But this actually, the reason I wanted to pick this was because it is kind of significant, because I think this is the event book that I think all other event books up to this day have been modeled after, where you have an Alpha, you have an Omega, and then you have about 6 or 7 different crossover books where you're almost forced to follow each one in turn so that you can get the entire story. And there have been multitudes of event books like this that have come out since. But as far as I can remember, this is the first time that they've ever, like, if you remember back in 95? Yeah, 95. They canceled the entire X-Men line for 4 months to do this Age of Apocalypse storyline. So you could not buy a regular X-Men book. This was the X-Men for 4 months. But looking at the Alpha issue sets up all of those other satellite books that are coming out, because you have your heroes. Some of them have switched allegiances. You have some other heroes that are stepping up and actually get their own book. I'm looking at you, Gambit, who up until this point was kind of a side character on the X-Men, but now here he's stepping up and taking charge of his own team. You have Magneto, who's now back on the side of the Angels, with his own group, and he's kind of married to Rogue, and they have a child.
How was that possible? How did they have a child? I mean, don't get me wrong. I know before anyone tells me, I do know when the boy loves a girl and they share a special kiss. I know all that stuff.
Magnetic personality.
So no, and I had the same thing when I was rereading this issue today, because they go through this whole thing where Rogue is like, I just want to be able to touch my son, and blah 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 blah. And Magneto's like, oh well, we're gonna find a way to help you do that. And I'm like, you gave birth to him, didn't you? He was touching you for 9 months.
Yeah, on the inside. Yeah, so I was just thinking the conception element, because I mean,
well, that too
must be conceived in Savage Land where there's no powers.
Yeah, that's possible, but yeah, unless maybe she gave birth in the Savage Line too, and then okay, that explains it. Thanks, Johnny. Rant over.
Makes everything better now.
Yeah, so this book really is the I mean, just to kind of give you an overview of Age of Apocalypse. So the if I remember correctly, because it wasn't really explained in this book, Charles Xavier's dead. He was murdered, and his murder in the past changed the timeline. So the X-Men were never formed, and this is what happens. And we have Apocalypse, who is right now behind the scenes pulling the strings on everything. But this whole status quo is what has come of that. I think that this was a great idea for some introductions for brand new characters like Morph and Blink, and those were some characters that stuck around post Age of Apocalypse. But to bring back some characters that you haven't heard of in years, like Eunice the Untouchable, and
at first I thought that was a spelling mistake. I was calling it something else completely.
That's true.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, so anyway, so here the only person that remembers everything is Bishop, because Bishop was already time displaced, so he didn't lose his memory with everything. And there's Dark Beast, right? If he didn't look sinister enough, he's introduced on this page, and he's experimenting with the Blob. If you couldn't guess who that was,
I thought it was Mojo at one point. I was like,
yeah.
But...
It's, well, this is the 90s, right? So you get that questionable art style going on with the
I have something to say about the art.
Yeah. But so Dark Beast is not the only one that's not on the side of the Angels here, right? So you have Scott and Alex, so Cyclops and Havoc working with Mr. Sinister, and Mr. Sinister in turn working for Apocalypse. And so that's some interesting things. And I rereading this kind of made me kind of showed me a bit in the Krakoa X-Men of today of how some of the character relationships work are almost exactly like this. With
who's Scarlet?
I thought that was Maddie Pryor.
I think. Okay.
It was either that or Jean, and it's not Jean because
Jean shows up there, doesn't she?
Yeah.
Whilst you were talking, I've done some research, and apparently there is no real reason as to how they've had a baby other than the fact that somehow her power and Magneto's power cancel each other out.
Oh, right.
There's no real. I've looked on several websites and there's absolutely no clear guidance on how they managed to. Excuse me.
Obviously, it's because Scott Lobdell liked the idea of Magneto and Rogue being together.
Well, to be fair, that was hinted at way back when she went to the Siege Perilous and she was stuck in the Neverland. We all know Rogue in the jungle bikini. We all know that picture.
Yeah. So that's a revisit to that relationship. But yeah, I mean, overall, I liked the idea of Beast here being all evil and using his science knowledge to experiment on mutants, which is something that we've seen in the Krakoa X-Men. That's something that he's doing now. So,
and the legacy virus as well. He had to deal with something like that, didn't he?
Yep. So
a little foreshadowing there, or either that, or Marvel just didn't come up with a better idea. I know which one I think it is.
I like this because it was a left turn of a character you wouldn't expect. That shows a little bit of evil, and apparently had a strong enough fan following this to justify his inclusion into the 616 proper. So
cool. Excellent. Good call. Nice recap. 13th, what was your take on Dark Beast and X-Men Alpha 1?
A lot. Let's see if I could sum it up quickly. To Professor's point with this world or timeline or whatever, I looked at this book, and after reading it, I felt like it mined a couple of things. To me, the most successful timeline event in X-Men history to this point, in my opinion, was Days of Future Past.
Are you reading my notes? I swear to God.
I'm psychic. You didn't know that? So there's that, right? You're mining that idea. And then, yes, I agree with Bud. I think this was the Pandora's box. And this was the beginning of the lid opening with the X-Men being involved in multiple timelines or alternate realities. It's, almost like a Rip Hunter type thing. So this is where the beginning of the confusion starts. And I agree with that assessment. As far as the script in itself, it's typical 90s. This was just more of a opportunity to get all these characters in the X-Men universe at the time and create a new story with them. They didn't matter about allegiances. They were all mutants at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So there's that element as there in there as well. I think with the art, it's obviously typical 90s art, very exaggerated, muscular in places, mean faces sometimes, in a lot of that. If some pages, like with Dark Beast, it felt like it was a cross of Dale Keown and Liam Sharp. Maybe that's just how I saw it, but it very exaggerated art. And we all know that the 90s had the art explosion and the X-Men were at an all-time high in popularity. So to see all the characters in that universe together, I guess it didn't matter if they were
Sorry,
enemies of each other or
I'm not
not.
shaking my head at you. You're making some valid points. I'm just looking at this piece of art, and I'm just like, oh my god.
Yeah, everything was armor, everything was exaggerated, everything was a mean face, and if you didn't have that, you had some sort of claws or a gun. And that's basically the formula for the X-Men back then. And again, I'm not knocking the X-Men. I'm just saying that this is what when we were growing up, we were accustomed to this in the 90s. You couldn't get enough of this, and to Bud's point, they made an event out of this, and if you were an X-Men fanatic, you had no choice but to go along for the ride. And I think through time, you can kind of look at this from two views. You know, did this really help the X-Men franchise or not?
It did at the time.
It did at the time. It
And I
made
can tell
the
you,
sales.
you know what else Marvel had in 1995?
Problems.
A toy line.
Hey,
Toy
look
line.
at that. There he is. Well done.
So
they're also dealing with image as well. So the talent definitely left the building, if so to speak.
Yep.
And I'm trying to be nice. I know Johnny may not have such kind words
I
about
don't
Scott
have-
Lobdell, but
I don't have any kind
I'm
words.
trying to be nice here. I mean, you still the ship has to keep on running, right? The show must go on. So I get that, but this is what you got back then. Will I ever, you know, at this time when reading this, like, would I ever keep going reading X-Men? No, I was confused as hell. You know, you could see that the mining was there. Days of Future Past is, to me, one of the X-Men of the 80s best stories ever. It just gave you a glimpse into a world of like, oh my God, is that really going to happen? And then you're always left wondering, can this happen? That idea got mined, and then they made it a reality, and then they made it into a comic, and then they made it into runs, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I get that you want to keep trying to go with something that works, but I think this is the beginning of how things really got exaggerated with the X-Men.
Fair shouts. Right, a couple of points from me before I move on to the next book. I like curvy girls as much as the next person. That's fine. But somebody please explain to me how Jean Grey can be having a pelvis pointing one way and her boobs pointing the other. Why has every girl got double D boobs? It's like Moira. That's supposed to be Moira McTaggart, by the way. This character down here in the skin tight like outfit.
Oh yeah.
What? Rogue is equally all over the place figure wise. There was something I saw that I wanted to.
Well, the men are just as disproportional. Also.
Exactly. Yeah. This panel here. What are these on this back wall?
Those are shadows from the blinds
caused by a light,
caused by that window, because by the darkness. Yes.
So if those blinds are there, then shouldn't his shadow also be there? Not on the floor.
Not in this timeline, Johnny.
It's like, come on, guys. I do like that outfit she's wearing, whoever Scarlet is. How did Wolverine lose a hand? I don't understand that bit. Someone explain that to me.
I don't. Did they even explain that? I'm sure they explained that in the story, but
I don't know.
Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they were just like, okay, he's one hand now.
He's obviously riffing off Aquaman at the time, weren't he? Wasn't
he? Going back to your Scarlet comment, I always thought it was Wanda.
Do you think? Oh yeah, that could be a shout. Scarlet Witch, yeah.
But the red hair though.
She's got red hair, hasn't she?
She had red hair.
Cross between brown and red, in my opinion.
We should Google it in a second when we talk about another book. Right. So for me, I'm going to say right now, I've never liked Scott Lobdell, never. As a writer, as I said earlier, he could save kittens and pet dogs. Whatever. But as a writer, he doesn't do anything for me. Roger Cruz, the artist on this book, has a bit of a reputation online for being someone who homages art. I'm watching my words quite carefully here. So that'll explain the mix of Keown, Gary Frank, Joe Madura, any range of artists that you see on this book aped across there. And of course, it's an X book, so everyone expects a certain level of something to it. I also said some Eric Larson in there. That panel, I was shaking my head at. I don't know about you, Professor, but I look at that picture and I'm thinking cardiac.
Okay.
The Eric Larson character, with the big shoulders and his quarterstaff thing going on.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I will say I do prefer Gene with Logan. I think that's a much better fit for those two characters than Gene with Pretty Boy Scott. I like Scott with the White Queen. But then that's just my take on it. So if there's anything decent on there, as I said, I was checked out of comics at this point. So having read that this morning before the pod, boy was I glad I checked out the comics.
I was checked out too. The Onslaught event had me. I was done. I was tapped out with X-Men.
I think what was it? It was the Spider clones did me.
Yeah. I was very upset with Onslaught, and I'm like, what are they doing to the X-Men? Oh no, and now here we go. I'm like, oh, I can't do it.
No. For me, if you talk about X-Men, they should have tried hard to keep Fabian Nicieza on the book.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Because Fabian was doing a solid job on there. I thought, and you had Adam Kubert for a while. Or one of the Kuberts was the art replacing Jim Lee. Again, probably not spectacular artist back then, but solid. Definitely solid. All right. Okay, there we go. 2 up, 2 down. The last one even, is a peach of a book, as you'd expect, because I picked it.
Yeah.
I say that sarcastically. It is this beauty. It is the Justice League of America. Where's my numbers? It's number 187 from February 81. My notes say 18. It could have been 18. Can't be 81, is it? eBay has this down at a pricey sum of, are you ready? 3 whole English pounds. It was 81. Yeah, £3 you can get this book. Grade 6 on Go Collect has been sold for $50. I'm not sure anyone's buying this book for $50. I mean, it's a fun book and all, but written by Jerry Conroy, Don Heck,
Jerry
Conway. Sorry, my notes changed, man. Jerry Conway, Don Heck, and Frank McLaughlin on art. Ben Oder is on letters, and Gene D'Angelo is on colors. A couple of things in this book that I think absolutely make me smile. It is the blossoming romance between the Flash and Zatanna. Oh. And of course, we get the classic George Perez Zatanna costume look with that one. She goes to a cape and thigh highs. No fishnets, unfortunately, which is a shame. But essentially, the way it works is you see the League do what they do, and they come up across the villain. What's his name? It's
Proteus.
And he manages somehow to mix-plick the Justice League into different people and then put crooks in their bodies, which is the story of this. Funnily enough, the people that they change into, they still keep the powers. And I was like, what this? Zatanna, who you think would be the one that could save the day, gets taken out. And it's actually the Flash, because she's had a bit of a thing already with Zatanna, and obviously she's back in her old costume, and he's like, I'm a criminal investigator, so I should recognize something is wrong here. But then, of course, he doesn't. Well done. It is. We use the phrase of its time. I love this era of Justice League. This is probably my favorite era of Justice League. You've got the classic heroes. You've got a good supporting cast behind these. The next issue, you see Black Canary and the Hawks rock up. Green Arrow rocks up. So for me, it's absolutely just fun read. Nothing too serious happens. Nothing kind of, the world's not going to end. it's just a day in the life type of story. I thought this was an absolute blast. 13th, we'll go with you as you're our other DC fan before we finish off with the professor's thoughts.
Yeah, I could have sworn we reviewed this book before. I wasn't too sure, so I'll have to go
No.
back into the when we did our Tainted Love episodes. I'll have to go back into the
Did-
archives.
No, did we do that?
Yeah,
No.
I think so. But I'll look. Either way, it doesn't matter. I like this story. Jerry Conway, again, as you guys know, I confronted him about Gwen Stacy ruining Spider-Man for me in Marvel, but I did compliment him on not ruining DC for me. And I agree with Johnny. I loved him when he was on Justice League, and obviously one of my favorite stories he did, the Great Darkness Saga. But here we are with the Flash and Zatanna. I didn't know how they would try to make this work, but either way,
I don't think they do. I don't think they do. I think kind of like it's will they, won't they, will they, won't they, and then they don't.
well, it shows you that you can cook your dinner by the time they figure it out. So,
Yeah.
sorry, Barry. The the villain in Proteus that looked
a little quick.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, before dinner's done. The villain in Proteus reminded me a lot of Chameleon, but whatever.
Yeah.
It fits the story. We've seen this trope before of heroes getting either mind controlled or abducted or replaced, and for villainous purposes. But I think it was a good story. I enjoyed the art more than I did the script in this book, though.
Yeah, that's a good call. That's a good shout.
So
Definitely.
for sure, I did. There's some panels in here that are really, really, really good facial expression wise. Like even Aquaman looks pretty definitive, and you don't really hear me talking about something good with Aquaman. So there it is, and it's official. There's a panel too, like later on in the book, on page 13 of the book.
Of course it is. Of course it's 13.
The middle panel, I liked it a lot. Page 13 of the book.
All right, easy, Tiger.
Yeah. Let's
That
see.
one?
No, it says 13 on the bottom.
It says 13 on the bottom.
No, not
All
that
right,
bottom.
so-
The bottom of the book.
the lineup
That
book,
one.
the lineup panel.
Yeah, I like that where they're all lined up like that. So I like that angle. Like, there's a lot of things in here that like Zatanna towards the end of the book too with the new costume. If you go to page 16 of the comic, Johnny, like those panels of Zatanna, I love them. All of them.
Yeah.
All of them. Especially the top right, even the middle panel. This is Zatanna back then, and I don't know. I felt like at this time this puts Zatanna on the map. The previous costume was just not working. Just was not working at all. But overall, good book.
Good call. Excellent, Professor.
I thought this was a fun book. Definitely of its time. So the one thing that struck out to me was that Jerry Conway's writing on this and Don Heck on art. Now Don Heck kind of got a bad reputation towards the end of his career of being kind of a hack, right? But here I thought his stuff looked really good, and this is towards the end of his career here. So I didn't mind his art on this book at all. But then with Jerry Conway writing, it struck me as wow, a few years ago he's writing these serious stories in Spider-Man, and now he's working for DC and he's coming up with this. I was like,
Ash.
No, I'm not saying it was a terrible story. It's just like I said, these stories are not aimed at the teenage reader that Marvel was aiming at, right? This was more of like your kids and having a bit of fun and not having to worry or think too much about the reasons that you're writing the story, right? It's just like, hey, we have a bad guy and he's gonna switch bodies and so it was fun. It was just not as serious fare as what he was writing over and when he was killing Gwen Stacy.
Yeah, it's a fair shout. So this is the second issue. One is two-parter. You mentioned the art. Great post for Wonder Woman there. Spot on, I think, from that point of view. There was the thing that I really caught my eye in this book. There's a picture of the Hawks. Where's she at?
Yeah.
Where is she at?
It's a different artist in the second story, I think.
Oh no, it isn't. It isn't.
Frank McLaughlin, Rich Buckler.
Rich Buckler, second art. Yeah, Rich Buckler.
I'm sure I just said something. Oh, well, I apologize.
Because the first story ends, and then there's a second story at the end with the different lineup of heroes.
There you go. There you go. Okay, cool. I'm wrong then. But that picture of Hawk Girl, spot on.
If I could say something real quick on Don Heck's art, I thought he did a phenomenal job of drawing the Flash. Kind of drawing the Flash running, which is kind of done legendarily by Carmine Infantino.
Yep.
I thought he did a really good job, even with Superman flying, like that's hard to do as an artist, even to draw small in some panels to show them the distance. So I just want to give him a shout out for that. I thought that was very well done.
I think Don Heck suffers from comparison. You know,
I agree with that.
We talked about the 80s as being kind of like a bit of a dull period for DC Comics. It's probably not until The Dark Knight Returns DC kind of pull a finger out of their ass and start doing something contemporary. Even, I mean, we talk about of its time. That Justice League book we just looked at, the night from '81, it's not that dissimilar from the World's Finest book. You know, it's still kooky story ideas. You know, and when we're talking about Jerry Conway writing for DC, I mean, what year did he kill Gwen Stacy?
74, 73?
73, 74, something like that. So you're talking, he wrote that in 73, 74. This is 81. That's practically, 9 years, 8 years after that event. So, you know, obviously he's maybe not, don't want to put words in his mouth or anything, but, maybe he's like Don Heck, kind of like thinking to myself, well, you know what? These are my paycheck books. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have to create I don't have to create something large. These are just paycheck books, the same way John Byrne looked at the X-Men books.
DC had a legacy to maintain, and they made sure that everybody stuck to that script.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
to your point, it didn't change the template for quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I thought Don Heck was, I mean, he is one of the original Marvel artists when Marvel started, with Kirby and Ditko. And I would say Heck was like number 3 because he was the one that come up on Iron Man. He's the one that took over on Avengers when Kirby left. So that's, to me, was, I always considered him as part of that silver age of Marvel. And I think that he got overshadowed with that second generation of artists coming in, like the Neil Adams and everything. When those came in, Heck's artwork just didn't stand up, and he wasn't a Kirby conformist either. So, so to me, I think his artwork is suited here for DC.
Look at it from a DC standpoint as well. How would you not hire these name brands if you knew creators? You have to bring them in-house.
Yeah.
So that's another part of it as well.
The last point I'll make in relation to the Justice League book, it's outside of our remit. We can't talk about it so much, but it was later revisited mildly as part of the Identity Crisis storyline, which was one of the reasons why Jean got all torn up about that, because what happens if someone takes over the bodies, as in and that's the rabbit hole that got me looking for those books when I bought them for myself. It was like, right, what you talking about? Where's this at? And off I went to get it. And
I think we're only a few years from being able to talk about that story too.
Mark it on the calendar.
Yep.
Yeah.
Don't worry. I have my calendars marked up with times we could start talking about.
Yeah, excellent. This is great. Yeah, perfect. Let's mark that. That's how we're going to be our anniversary book. That's what we're going to do. Yes. All right. There we go. Times are ticking, even for us old-timers. That's it for another show. Professor, thank you so much for spending the time. I really do appreciate it. 13, thank you.
Favorite time of the week.
Me too, man. Me too. I love this show. 13, thank you for joining us after the debacle of the Giants game on Thursday.
Thank you, and whatever.
I'm not saying anything. I'm not jinxing out. I'm not saying anything. Don't forget to check out the UCPM for all your favorite shows, including Professor.
The No Prize Podcast, all about Marvel Comics, the MCU, and Disney Plus. Check out Ahsoka. It's awesome.
Cool. 13th, you've made a welcome return somewhere. Where can we hear from you next?
On the Definitive Crusade, all about DC Comics. Current stuff.
Current
I'm
stuff.
reading current stuff again. Can you believe it?
It's absolutely. You know what? It's a really great addition to the show because everyone else is reading bang up to date and 13's not quite there. So it's like, what's this? Why is that? Who? And it's just so good fun. Just so fun.
Back in my day.
Yeah.
I
didn't
find
talk about
myself
this
saying
yet.
that a lot. That's for sure.
And of course, check out Outside the Panels for loads of great interviews with up and coming artists, writers, as well as some existing pros. All there for you on the UCPN, whatever your flavor. We have got you covered. Gentlemen, it's been an absolute blast. It's almost time for football, so I will bid you, as always, adios.
See ya.
But done.